As we read, I would like you to turn to the book of Joshua, chapter 4. We'll be reading from verses 1 to 7. We've started a series entitled Build It, and this is the third installment of that series. Our first installment, we spoke on Jesus saying to Peter, on this rock, he will build his church, the confession that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. Last week, we spoke on Noah and building a better you. And as Noah built the ark, he was able to save his generation. Tonight, let's look to Joshua chapter 4, beginning at verse 1. And Joshua is the sixth book in the Bible. And it reads by saying, and it came to pass, when all the people had completely crossed over the Jordan, that the Lord spoke to Joshua. And he said to Joshua, he said, take for yourself 12 men from the people, one man from every tribe. Pay attention. How many men did he take? 12 men from each tribe. And command them, saying, take for yourself how many stones? 12 stones. From here, out of where? The midst of the Jordan. From the place where the priest's feet stood firm. And you shall carry them over with you and leave them in the lodging place where you lodge tonight. Then Joshua called the 12 men from he had appointed from the children of Israel, one man from every tribe, just as the Lord said to him. And Joshua said to him, cross over before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and each of you take one stone up and place it on your shoulder, according to the number of tribes of the children of Israel. That this may be a sign among you, when your children ask in time to come. What are the children asking? And what are you saying? What do these stones mean to you? Then you shall answer them, that the waters of Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed over from the Jordan, the waters of the Lord were cut off, and these stones shall be for a memorial to the children of Israel forever. Why not turn to the person next to you and say, who are you? I don't remember. I don't remember. The title for our sermon for tonight is I Don't Remember, and you can have a seat in God's presence. I don't remember. This memorial shall serve for your generations to remember. I have a confession to make, all right? One of my weaknesses is that I have a very, very bad memory. I tend to forget a lot. I tend to forget a lot of things a lot of the times. It's a miracle that I remember what I have to say when I get up here on stage, but we thank God for the goodness of God. Anybody like me tend to forget a lot? Yeah, forgetful people. I tend to forget. I'm the type of person that I would go to the grocery and I would have to buy 2 packs of sugar. And all the way to the grocery, I'll be singing it over and over. 2 pack of sugar, 2 pack of sugar, 2 pack of sugar, 2 pack of sugar, 2. And when I reach to the grocery, from the time I turn off my vehicle and walk inside, I'll be like, 1 pack of sugar, 1. And I'll probably take the wrong amount of sugar. I have a terrible memory. Most of my childish age, it's a blur to me. I can barely remember it. I base my memories on what people would have told me I experienced. I don't know why that happens. But the significant aspects in my life, I do remember it. And when we look at the children of Israel, they had a memory issue as well. They had a memory problem. Because oftentimes they would find themselves in a predicament. And when they faced this complication, they would forget what God had done before for them. This is where we pick up this passage in the crossing of the river of Jordan. God realized, hey, these people are forgetful. They were so forgetful that they didn't remember when God delivered them from the famine that almost killed them. Then he brought them into Egypt. Every time they look back, they only remembered 430 years in Egypt. But the reason why they ended up in Egypt was because they were going to die from a starvation, from a famine, and God had to deliver them out of it. When they ended up in Egypt, God delivered them by Moses with 10 plagues. When they got out of Egypt and they went into the wilderness, the first thing they faced was a Red Sea. God parted the Red Sea and they walked through on dry land into the wilderness. When they entered into the wilderness, they reached the promised land and they said, we can't go in again. They forgot the goodness of God. They forgot how powerful their God was. And they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. For 40 years in the wilderness, God did miracles after miracles. When they had no water, Moses spoke to the rock and water flowed. Again, they had no water. Moses again struck the rock and water flowed. And every time they would come up against Moses and they would complain and say, did you bring us out here to die? When God fed them, he fed them with manna from heaven. They got fed up of the manna, he fed them with quails. And they would keep forgetting. When serpents came out of the sand and bit them and they were about to die, Moses lifted up a staff, and when they looked at it, they were all healed. But yet, every time a new challenge came, they forgot the previous conquest. They forgot. I don't remember. And here they were standing at the river Jordan, about to finally enter into the promised land. They had never been this part and never been this way before. And as much as we tend to forget the good things, the goodness of God, it's ironic that we remember the bad things. It's ironic that we forget the good things, but we remember the bad things. We forget the happy moments, but we remember the moments of hurt. And here we find they stand at the brink of entering into the promised land. And as I read this passage, it brought up more questions than answers for me. And tonight we want to answer some of these questions that popped into my mind. The first thing is, why was the river Jordan so important? Why the Jordan? Why the Jordan? They stood at the Jordan, and now God said to them, build me a momentum. Why now, God? They spent 400 years forgetting every time. They spent 430 years in slavery forgetting every time that God was a miracle-working God. But why now, when they stood at the Jordan, that God said to them, now is the time I want you to build something that you'd remember me by. Build it, build it, build it. And the reason for that is the Jordan River was the only river that separated the wilderness from the promised land. The only mass of water, stream of water that separated them. And crossing over meant that they were going to leave the wilderness, leave that place of wandering, and go into the promises of God. And God wanted them to know that every time you look at this momentum, you can remember that I have been faithful through 40 years of wandering, through 430 years of slavery. I have been faithful. And what's quite interesting is that they were crossing the Jordan River during the springtime. Now, I know we only have 2 seasons here, right? Dry and wet and more wet. That's true. But the springtime meant that the riverbanks would have been bursting with water. This would have been the time when the river was flowing the most, or there was the heaviest stream or flow of water in the river. I remember a couple of years ago, I went to a hike in Blanchardshire called Three Pools. And the first time I went during the dry season. And this hike in Blanchardshire, as the name would suggest, there are 3 pools. You hike to the first one, and then you have to either swim, or you can take a long way around to get to the 3rd pool. And the first time I went, I swam, and it was easy. It was really, really easy. The second time I went back, however, I went in the rainy season. And I was with a big group. And most of us decided that we'd swim across. Some decided they would walk over. But while swimming, what we did not anticipate was an extra strong flow of water because of it being the rainy season. And when we had almost reached through the 2nd pool, the strong flow of water started to cause difficulty for some of the swimmers because they couldn't go through the stream that was coming down. And luckily, the tour guide, he got a bamboo rod and he fished them out one by one. But this is what they were about to experience. This Jordan River wasn't a nice, peaceful river that they were just going to easily walk across. This river was running, running, running. If anything, it was more dangerous than crossing the Red Sea. This would have been their biggest challenge yet that they had faced, because the Red Sea was still a calm body of water. But this river was boisterous. And God chose the springtime. That's strange. He could have chosen any other time. They were wandering for 40 years. He could have chosen when the waters were low and when there was not a strong flow of water and say, now I want you to cross this river. But he chose the springtime, because God will choose the biggest obstacles to build your faith. And he wanted them to look at that river and say, if God said he's going to dry it up for us to walk through, even though it's loud, even though there's a strong current, even though it seems impossible, and if the water continues, we will drown, we are going to go through the river because God is in it. And that's why he said to them, let's go through the Jordan. He wants to take you through the places where you think you cannot go, where you think, God, better you take me in a different season. He wants to say, I promise to carry you in to the promised land, and I'm going to take you through. What is your Jordan? What is that thing that is between you and the promises of God? What is your Jordan? For Abraham, his Jordan was infidelity. For David, his Jordan was Goliath. For Hosea, his Jordan was unfaithfulness. For Jacob, his Jordan was he was a deceitful man. For Jonah, his Jordan was disobedience. For Joseph, his Jordan was betrayal. And I don't know what your Jordan is, but I want to assure you tonight, when you reach to the riverbank, no matter what it is, when God says step in, he's going to dry it up and he's going to take you through. You got to walk through that Jordan saying, my God is a miracle worker. I haven't forgotten the 470 years that he's done miracles. I haven't forgotten if I'm 12 years old, the 12 years he did miracles. If I'm 50 years old, the 50 years that he's been doing miracles. I have not forgotten. He is a miracle working God. So why the Jordan? Because God wanted to show them, I'm going to do it and keep doing it over and over again. So he said to them, cross through the Jordan. But look at what he says in verse 2. In verse 2, he says to Joshua specifically, he says, take for yourself 12 men from the people, one man from every tribe. In verse 3, he says to them, go and take, look at it, 12 stones from here, out of where? The midst of the Jordan. From the place where the priest's feet stood firm. Why the middle? Why the middle of the river? That would have been the hardest place to acquire stones from. But he tells them, go to the middle. Go to the middle and gather one for each tribe. And there were 12 tribes of Israel. So there were 12 stones that they would have had to gather. But look at what he says. He says, go and take the stones that the priests, their feet stood firm on. Because previous to this, God said to them, take the Ark of the Covenant, let the priests go first, and let them stand in the middle of the Jordan. And when they do that, the water will dry up, and then you will go and cross. So when he said to them, go in the middle, he was saying to them, go to the exact place where the Ark was. What was the Ark of the Covenant? The Ark of the Covenant represented the presence and the power of God. The Ark of the Covenant, it represented the presence and the power of God. And he said, go into the middle. He said, take the ark into the middle, because God wants to not just be in front of you. He not just wants to be behind you, but he wants to be in the middle of everything you do. So that's why he said to them, let the ark be in the middle, and let the ark remain in the middle, and take the stones from in the middle, because it's in the middle that I was in the midst of what was going on. And it's in the middle that I did the miracle. I want you to know God is not just in front of you. He's not just behind you, but he's in the middle of everything you do. That's why we say, Jesus be the center of my life. He is in the midst of it. He's in the thick of your pain. He's in the middle of your tears that you cry. He's in the places where you think you can't trace him. He's there in your depression. He's there in your pain. He's there in your challenges. He is there in your circumstances that you can't seem to find a way out. He is there in the middle. So he said to them, set the ark down in the middle. Think of this podium as the ark. The ark is in the middle. But for the ark to be in the middle, it has to go before the people first. So if I'm the children of Israel, when I stand here, I see God in front of me. I see him ahead of me. When I go through the water and I'm in the place where doubt is the greatest, where is God? He's right beside me. And when I come out of the river and I look back, he is there behind me. I like to think of it as the solar system. The sun is the first thing you see when you get up, and it's the last thing you see when you go to sleep for regular people. It's the first and last thing. But while it's the first and last thing, the solar system, all the planets, including the earth, revolves around the sun. It's in the center. And if the earth shifts just by 0.01 of a millimeter closer or further away from the sun, all life on earth will cease to exist. The sun is in the middle, it goes before you, and it stays behind you. This is how important it is for God to be in the middle, to be behind you, and to be in front of you. If there's just a shift, just a little, all life ceases to exist. If we just pull away just a little and say, God, I don't want you in the center anymore. I want my popularity in the center. God, I don't want you in the center anymore. I want my abilities and talents in the center. God, I don't want you in the center anymore. I want my money in the center. God, I don't want you in the center anymore. I want my career. I want my kids. When there's that little shift, although you think life is going to get better, all life ceases to exist. Life dies. Your spirit man dies on the inside. And I want to let you know tonight, you need Jesus in the center. He needs to be in the heart of man. He needs to be at the core of your life. Your life needs to revolve around God, not God revolving around you. Yes, he'll go before you. Yes, he'll shield from behind. But you got to ensure every day Jesus is at the center of your life. He said, put the ark in the middle. They could have placed it anywhere else, but he said, put it in the middle. I want to be in the middle of your life. I want to be in the middle of your soul. So he said to them, put it in the middle. And they crossed over. Then he said to each one of the men from each one of the tribes, go and take 12 stones. Which brings us to our next question. Why the stones? Why the stones? Why 12 stones? Like I said, there was 12 tribes of Israel. And this is some Sunday school or Bible school lesson. Who are the 12 tribes? Anybody can guess all 12? Should pull out $100. Hey, look at that. A magical $100 in the back of my bucket. But that was unintentional. This is for the Lord. You don't get money for guessing. 12 tribes. Anybody? All 12? Let me start you off. Number 1 was Reuben. Number 2, Simeon. Then we have Levi. Then we have Judah. Then we have Issachar. Then we have Zebulun. Then we have Gad, Asher, Dan, and Naphtali, Joseph, and Benjamin. 12 tribes. 12 tribes. 12 tribes. 12 tribes. So the 12 tribes, they each took a stone. You guys were supposed to put it on your shoulder. Did they put it on their shoulder and bring it out? They placed it on their shoulder, and they brought it and laid it down at the camp where Joshua was. All 12. Now, I don't have 12, right? I have a little bit less. Forgive me. But I was wondering, I was trying to figure it out. Why 12? Why 12? Why 12? Why 12? Why 12 stones? And it came to me that this wasn't one miracle. See, I keep thinking it was one nation, so it was one miracle. But when they crossed, they would have not crossed as one nation. They would have crossed one tribe at a time. So for every tribe that walked through the Jordan River, that was one miracle that God did. This was not one miracle, this was 12 miracles. So they had to have 12 stones as a momentum. So he took the stones and he rested down. And then he began to build on these stones a momentum. He started resting one on top of the other, one on top of the other. And he built and he built and he built because they needed something to remember. And he kept building one on top of the other, one on top of the other, until it was large enough that all could see that God was building something, that they could remember that he is there in the middle of it, that he was the one that brought them through the Jordan, that he was the one that kept them the entire time that they were in the wilderness. So he built it. Now this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is only 6. This is only 6. And he built a monument with 12 stones. So it was pretty big, right? It would have been tall. Let me go back on the stage so that you see the height difference. This is only half the height. I would have needed a ladder to build the other 6. And obviously, if they placed it on their shoulders, these were big stones. They were heavy. And he built it up as a monument. Because every time they look at it, when they look at it, they would see something that was big. Because it's man's mentality to see and look for something big. To see something that stands tall and large. And when they look at it and they remembered every miracle that God did, it was able to help them that when something new stood in front of them, they could look back and see how big all that God had done before them was. They could look back and say, if God did all of this, if God brought through all 12 tribes, then no matter what we face as we cross the Jordan, when we enter into Canaan, no matter which army stands up before us, there's a heap and a pile that signifies all the miracles that God has done in my life. And for us to be able to face new challenges, it requires of us to look back and remember. And as we start remembering one memory at a time, one miracle at a time, it will start to pile up and it will get so big that it will become bigger than the challenge that is in front of us. And when we look at the miracles, the challenges will seem insignificant compared to what God had done before. So 12. And each one not just represented one moment. It represented 40 years in the wilderness. It not just represented 40 years in the wilderness, but it represented 430 years of slavery. It represented all that God had done before. Not just that, but all that he will do as life goes on. I don't remember. I don't remember. And I think at times it's a tool of the enemy to try to get us to forget when God has been faithful. Because if we forget, we feel as though this mountain cannot be moved. I've never been down this path before, but he did it before. He did it before. He did it before. He did it before. He did it before, and he will do it again. He's the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. He will never fail us. He's in the middle of it with us. And as you remember God's faithfulness, I'm asking you not to depend on fiction. I'm asking you to depend on facts, because it's a fact that God brought you into this world. He kept you from in your mother's womb. It's a fact that when you were sick and ill, he rose you from that bed of affliction, and he gave you strength again. It's a fact that every day when you drive to work, his angels guard you from accidents. It's a fact that when you walk the streets, he is protecting you from evil that wants to come and steal and kill and destroy. It's a fact every day that God is doing miracles. I'm asking you to remember the facts of what God has proven in your life. And no matter what the enemy throws your way, it will never make you fumble, because you have a factual God, a real God, one that works in your life, one that has never failed you. This is the momentum that he built. He built a momentum so that when your memory fails, you can be reminded by the momentum of what God has done. So why 12 stones? Because this is significant. What God has done in your life is significant. And I want to jog your memory tonight. That's the whole purpose of our sermon. Joshua, he built a monument, not just for him, but what does it say? When your children look at it and they ask, what is this about, Dad? What is this about, Mom? Why are there 12 random stones here? You could say to them, this is a reminder, a memorial of what God has done for us. I wonder how many times you are telling your kids what God has done in your life. Because sometimes we need to depend on the faith of our forefathers to get us through the fight. Sometimes we're just too young to remember, hey, you know, when Mom was having me, the doctor said I would die in that womb. Doctor said I wouldn't live. I was born at 7 months, premature. Doctor said you won't live. But God kept me alive. Sometimes, parents, it's our responsibility to ensure that we pass down the memories to our kids and to their generations and the generations to come, so that there's not just a fate of one generation, but we take a fate of one generation, place it on another generation, and then another generation, and then another generation. So my kids could say, God not just did miracles in my life, he did it in my father's life. Not just in my father's life, but in my grandfather's life. What are you telling them? What are you teaching them? Are you giving them the memories of God's faithfulness so that they can fight this fight of what comes their way? He said to them, tell the generations to come. When they look and see, when they look at your life and ask, Mom and Dad, how are you so well off? How are you so stable? How are you so mature spiritually? You got to tell them. You got to teach them. Don't be afraid and hide the pain and say, I don't want to tell you the challenges. I don't want to tell you what I've been through. Let them know, yes, I've been through stuff, but God took me through it. Don't hide it from them, but build their memory, build a repertoire, build something in their lives that they will know that God will be fighting for them. So they built it, and they built it not just for themselves, but the generations to come. I don't remember. God has been faithful. I want to close in Colossians chapter 2, verse 13 to 14. Because much as Joshua built a momentum, that when you look, you would remember, Christ also left something for us to look at, to remember. Look at what it says. And you, being dead in your trespasses and in the uncircumcision of your flesh, he has made alive together with him, having forgiven you all your trespasses, having wiped out the handwriting of requirements that was the law that was against us, which was contrary to us, and he has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross. Jesus left the cross so that when we can look at it, we would remember, I was a sinner. I was once lost. My destiny was once hell, but Jesus came and died for me. When I look to the cross, I remember I was dying. I was lost, but God redeemed me with the blood of Jesus. He nailed my sin to the cross, that it was crucified and dead, that now I can be alive. I want you to remember that God sent Jesus, his only begotten Son, just for you. Just for you. This is why influence starts with the cross, because God is always at the center of it. And when we look at the cross, we remember Jesus paid it all for each and every one of us. He died for you because he wanted you to have everlasting life. And this is what God offers through the cross.